Hello, hello, hello. Hey, folks. Good evening. Happy Monday. Welcome to We Demoted Mitch Monday. Very exciting evening because it's a special day, right? It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We've got a special guest. And after we check in with tonight's amazing co-host, we're going to be starting an impeachment-focused news roundup. We got a call to action for you, a very important call to action for you, and then a conversation with Louisville Representative Attica Scott, a true progressive leader in the legislature, longtime friend of this live stream, and someone we can always count on to speak her truth and to seek justice and accountability. So look forward to that. But first, as you have probably heard, as you've probably noticed, there's a little logo there on your screen right now. We are making a transition from an anti-Mitch campaign to an effort to build a larger, more vibrant, and impactful progressive movement here in Kentucky. I'll be honest, we have been inspired by Georgia, also Wisconsin, which you might not have heard as much about, but also very important transition that's been made in Wisconsin. We know we need to focus on the grassroots. We need to share our vision for a more compassionate political agenda across our Commonwealth. And we are going to be Progress Kentucky very soon. And this show is going to be changing its name as well. And to help make these changes, please consider making a contribution. We've got some great ideas and some great plans, but to put them into place is going to take resources. There ain't nothing free in this world, folks. So please head over to our ActBlue account. Any amount is appreciated. Thank you so much in advance for anything you can do to help the cause. All right, let's turn to our amazing co-hosts as we do every week. Who are you, where are you, and what does your protest sign say today? Oh, and you there on the internet, you are not off the hook. We want to see them in the comments. We want to see we've got a little bit of a special flavor for you because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We want to hear your favorite MLK quote. So that's what we're doing for our signs tonight. So I'm Aaron, I'm coming to you from Charlesburg on Lexington's southeast side. My sign says, "The curse of poverty has no justification in our age." All right, Kimberly, what you got?
Well, I'm Kimberly Cecil Jones, and I'm coming to you from Louisville, Kentucky, the great home of the Run for the Roses. And my MLK part of a speech that I want to give today is, and it's the part of the speech that everybody skips over, okay? And I have a dream speech. And it says this. It says, "We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality." Straight from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself.
Boom. Absolutely timely. Timeless, I suppose, unfortunately, it seems like. Samantha Jean.
Amen, and thank you for that, Kimberly. So I'm Samantha Jean Moore, and I am hailing from Cadiz, Kentucky, holding it down for the western part of the state. And my quote from Martin Luther King Jr. is, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Because we can have no liberty and no freedom until there is no freedom and no justice until there is freedom and justice for all. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, so big day, of course. The transition team, the Biden administration did their day of service, National Day of Service for MLK Day, which had been suspiciously absent under the Trump administration, but an idea that the Obama administration, I think, started up. I think it was Obama. I actually don't know. It could have been, I don't know, could have been Bush, could have been Clinton. But I know that the Obama administration definitely wrapped its arms around that idea of the day of service. It always struck me a little bit weird, right? Like, because was that what MLK was about, service? I mean, it's not like he wasn't. He was a pastor, right? But was that the focus of his ministry? No, the focus of his ministry was action and activism and speaking these truths, right? So a day of service is like, yeah, fine, but it's, again, it's like without the work, without the activism, you don't get the fundamental changes that's what MLK sought. that's what he fought for. So, I don't know. That's my take on the day of service. I think volunteering at a food bank is always a good thing to do. But I would say, arguing and organizing the Black Lives Matter movement is going to be far more in touch with, MLK legacy than that time at a food bank. That's just me. Guys, what do you think?
I'd like to add to that. I think it's really important to remember what our government wanted to do to Martin Luther King, which was to neutralize him, to neutralize his message. And I think that people kind of forget or they don't understand the psychology of, instead of completely erasing someone like MLK, instead our government and our society has just sort of twisted his message and just made him into this kind of feel-goody, character that talked about unity and peace. But we need to remember that Martin Luther King was one of the most hated men in society at that time. I remember seeing some like jokes and like one joke in particular where they were talking about him having a peaceful protest, and they're saying, are you going to have another peaceful protest? And in the background was just these buildings, burning. And it was really analogous to the Black Lives Matter movement, where we have people who come out and they're saying we're having a peaceful protest, and then they are antagonized by police and other people who are riling up, and creating violence, when the initial message, of course, was for peace. So, Martin Luther King was for peace, absolutely. But he was assassinated, and very likely by people in our government. So I just think it's just really important to remember the truth of Martin Luther King, and that his words were divisive, and they were very specific about uplifting marginalized people, specifically Black communities and the poor. And it wasn't just some feel-good message of unity, but that so instead of just blocking him out, our government and our society has always just sort of neutralized and whitewashed his message.
Oh yeah, he is so popular now, but at the time of his death, he was not very popular because they've sanded off the rough edges and they've made him as just, all about love, which, the love quotes are fantastic. But yeah, the dream speech was amazing. But the organizing that, created, that, sought to create real fundamental change in society was not well received at the time, right? Kimberly, what do you think?
At the time, Dr. Martin Luther King, a very brilliant man, a man that made his mark all across the world. But when we have this holiday, this one day a year to commemorate his memory of love and peace and all of these great things, you're very, very right, Aaron and Samantha, that we need to be very honest about who he was. And in my household, from the time you come out of the womb, you learn about these monumental Black people that made such a contribution to society. And Dr. Martin Luther King was no wimp, and he wasn't like turn the cheek all the time. And he was very, very much considered a radical. And those that participated with him were considered radicalized. He believed in socialism. He believed in the government giving back to the people so that the people could have a living wage. He always talked and preached about a living wage for everyone, and not the other way around, that you have a certain percentage that has the money. And because no one ever receives that livable wage, we all live in a certain type of poverty. Also, Dr. Martin Luther King, as I was brought up for these 53 years of Martin Luther King, he also marched with my with my grandfather on many occasions and stayed at the house when he came to Louisville. So they were very good friends, and I learned a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King also from my grandfather, who was a radical in his day, in his time. So we must understand at that time, and nobody would have liked him. Predominantly, white people could not stand him. Also, we need to understand that, like Samantha was saying, the FBI, the CIA, everyone was on him. He was constantly underneath surveillance. So, and one thing I would like to point out very, very quickly, that on this particular day, you see a lot of people putting these quotes out, and Hannah Drake, the great poet laureate from Louisville of national and international acclaim, had put it best, that on this day you see so many people put these quotes out of love and roses, and it's just wonderful, but he was so much more than that. I suggest that everybody reads his letters from the Birmingham jail, just to start yourself off with, to understand exactly who he was and what he stands for. And if he was living today, he would be a leader of our time.
Oh yeah. Letter from the Birmingham jail is just, it's amazing. Of course, he rails against the white moderates who are impeding real progress. Right? It's not that they're the opposition, but they're the kind of brakes on progress. And because they're always saying go slow and the time's right, isn't right now. So really, I think important to just think about the historical context of MLK and the important work that he did. And he wasn't just about not just, and his focus was not solely on the civil rights movement. As he kind of expanded his mission, labor organizing was critically important to him. The March on Washington was about a march on poverty, right? And for jobs. That was the march, right? And he had an expansive vision. He spoke out against Vietnam, which I think made a lot of people in the establishment very angry with him. And of course, as Kimberly and Samantha said, so that the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, was bound and determined to take him out because he was concerned he was going to be this popular communist figure. And J. Edgar Hoover was so freaked out by communism. There's a new documentary, actually, Sam Pollard, who is Eyes on the Prize, MLK /FBI, which is available now. People should check that out. They just declassified a bunch of the FBI files on MLK and just the dirty tricks and horrible, horrible things they did to him. All right, so we need to move on. We're going into Mitch in the news because Mitch is always in the news. A really important story today, of course, in this kind of historic moment we're in. This violent insurrection in the Capitol has now led to Trump making history. The only president to be impeached twice. That single article of impeachment was for inciting an insurrection. That happened very quickly in the House of Representatives last week. And this was the most bipartisan impeachment, most aye votes, 232 votes in favor of impeachment, remarkable votes by Liz Cheney, who is a horribly conservative member of Congress from Wyoming. She holds the third most powerful position in Republican leadership. She was joined by 9 other Republicans in voting for impeachment. Liz Cheney said, "There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution." So really historic vote last week. Way to go, Trump. You are historic. You have been impeached twice, never before. Most bipartisan impeachment in history. The mix of positions, kind of in addition to those who voted to impeach, Kevin McCarthy, who's the Republican leader, said they should censor the president, that he was indeed responsible for the violence. And then you had, of course, the Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz crowd who continue to blame the Democrats and their extreme liberal agenda. Kind of one more example of the wrongs being heaped upon poor Trump. Oh, poor Trump. He was the real victim in all of this, of course, people. Oh, that was just disgusting. Every time Jim Jordan came to the floor to speak, I just, had to mute it. Really, it made me vomit in my mouth. The number of people, Republicans, that were willing to confront Trump's big lie about that stolen election was remarkably small, right? These Republicans are just still happy to, let people believe these lies that Trump has fed them. That cancer remains. And there's going to be no unity until these lawmakers come clean about the lies they enabled and promoted. But of course, the Mitch in the News piece, in case you missed it, it was reported in the New York Times, confirmed by other media, that Mitch is glad, quote, glad that Democrats are pursuing impeachment, which will make it easier to purge Trump from the party. So, I don't necessarily disagree with Mitch at this point. He issued a statement: while the press has been full of speculation, I have not made a final decision on how I will vote, and I intend to listen to the legal arguments when they are presented to the Senate. So, what he didn't do, unfortunately, was to agree to bring the Senate back immediately to take up the trial, saying it was impossible to do so, which of course, him saying it was impossible for the impeachment to happen before Trump left office is a lie, right? It's his own history is ignored. He is able to bend the Senate timeline of possible and impossible to line up perfectly with his political agenda and his goals. Amy Coney Barrett being a great example of that, going from committee votes to confirmation in just 4 days. So my dream of a one-day President Pence, unfortunately, seems to be dashed. But I'll argue the prospects for conviction remain very challenging. If all the Ds vote to convict, they're going to need 17 Republicans to agree. That is a very tough number. And looking through the people, it seems very challenging to get to. But if Mitch supports the effort, if Mitch actually does speak on the floor and vote to convict, and he does it early, I think he allows, or if he makes it clear to his caucus, he's not whipping the vote, that it's a vote of conscience, and that he will be voting to impeach or to convict, I think that does make it possible. And then, of course, one thing that's interesting, although you need the 17 Republicans to vote to convict, you can, in fact, then strip him of his powers or strip him of his benefits and make sure he doesn't vote or ever seek federal office again with just a simple majority. So kind of a two-part thing that could happen there in the Senate. But there does seem to be an unshakable base of support of Trump and the Republican Party, and that makes the political math very tricky. So the Trump crime syndicate, the Trump family, has been very clear that if you don't maintain the loyalty, they will find folks to primary you. So, due to these gerrymandered districts, there are far too many seats that are so safe for a party that the primary is the actual race for that seat in Congress. Republican primary voters tend to be far more conservative overall. Trump's influence in a relatively low turnout race can be enormous. So it's a real political threat to say that they will find somebody to run against you in a primary, even if you're a fairly popular Republican politician. I think it's a bit more of a kind of threat to House members than senators, right? Because the House is up every 2 years. There's not that many senators that are up in 2022. But right now, there's a new CNN poll that shows 43% of Republicans think Trump should remain the leader of the party. So while that's still a very big number for inciting an insurrection, it's less than half of Republicans think he should be the leader. And who else would they expect, right? And he now has his lowest approval rating ever, 34% approved to 64% disapprove or unfavorable. Of course, Mitch actually has a lower approval rating. So Mitch is 22% approval to 66% unfavorable. And then another poll shows Mitch's approval rating falling off in kind of two cliffs. So it's like, he was pretty popular among the Republicans. This is just among Republicans. But then when he acknowledged that Joe Biden won while Trump was still pushing his lies, his favorability among Republicans just dropped off a cliff. And then kind of post-attack, when he voted to confirm Biden's victory, again, another notch down. So he's incredibly unpopular among Republicans right now. And of course, as we say on this show, Mitch has no political beliefs beyond power. He knows his route to regain power is to elect and to reelect as many Republicans as possible. The outlook for Trump remains politically murky. The fact that he's been deplatformed limits his power significantly. That sheer number of corporations who have publicly committed to halting their donations to Republicans who vote against recognizing the free and fair elections, that's a factor right now, right? Because, the reason that Mitch has built his power is because he's so good at bringing those funds in. So as Trump is a liability for the Republicans' ability to bring in those funds, that's huge. It might not make a difference in the polls, but it makes a big difference in Mitch's calculations. So that might be the difference between a vote to convict and a vote to acquit, I think, in as much as I can ascertain what Mitch will be concerned about. I do think that corporate money is a big deal. Samantha Jean?
I agree that I think that the issue with the corporate money is probably the biggest issue that Mitch cares about and is going to be acting based on whatever he feels is going to be happening there. When it comes to the Republican base and really just the population in general, my fear is just that people seem to forget things really quickly. So of course we've had this this very real insurrection, sedition, treason, attack against our government and against our democracy. And the reality is that a lot of people just don't seem to care, or because of how quickly that news and things have happened, especially in the last 4 years, it seems like we've just had tragedy after scandal after tragedy after scandal. So yes, this big thing happened, but it's been 2 weeks now, and it just seems like people kind of just forget about it. And it just goes back to I'm Team Republican, and so I support them no matter what. And that's a really big problem. Of course, you mentioning that Mitch doesn't seem to care about anything politically. He just cares about remaining in power. And it seems that a lot of people have that same mentality, that they don't necessarily have a moral compass or don't have a strict line of policies that they're following. They just want, it's just like sports. They support their team and they want their team to win. I almost think that with the pandemic, with the absence of sports, that politics have become like people's new kind of sports frontier, and they just are rallying for their team no matter what. And that is really problematic, because I'm so happy that a few did seem to have, were like shaken. Of course, if you are cowering under your desk, fearing for your life, that maybe makes you wake up and go, oh, wow, maybe Trump is crazy and this is absolutely ridiculous. And how can we even support something like this? So I think a few people maybe had that sort of realization. And maybe some of the public had those thoughts for just a little bit, but I wonder if it's just very quickly, people don't really care anymore, and are just going back to picking sides, picking my team. But I personally, what would make me really happy is I would love to see a resurgence of the Republican Party that actually does have a set of values that they want to stick to, that's supports law and order, as they say, and that would be great if those people would stand up and say, these people, these terrorists, these Nazis, these people who are calling for blood, they are not a part of the Republican Party. I would love for people to disown and say, this is not who we are, and go back to being strong and proud Republicans. Go for it. I would love to see that. But unfortunately, that's either only happening a little bit or maybe not happening, and they are just like fine to still have those guys on their team, and that is really, really problematic for the Republican Party and for our democracy, for our entire country, because I think that everybody needs to come together and wholeheartedly disown those people and say that this is not something that we're going to accept and stand for. But in the absence of that, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't necessarily trust Mitch McConnell to make the best decision.
No, I mean, we all know, Mitch's decision is going to be based on power, and the politics of the moment. I do, I think in terms of what he has said so far, I'm going to give him some credit for, I think his speech before the vote in the Senate, before they had to evacuate, and his speech when they came back. I think we're both, he's my opponent, but I'm going to acknowledge when he is, saying things that are healthy for our democracy. And what he was doing, I think, was healthy for our democracy.
I agree. He was acting like a statesman, and I think that a lot of his speeches in the recent days and weeks have been proper, and I do think that he is still a Southern gentleman in the sense of the word. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have integrity, but it does mean that you know how to act in public, and I do think that he has maintained that. At least he has maintained decorum up to this point. And so at least if he can stand up for that, I mean, we may have a chance. And we'll get back to that later in this call to action, where I'll be, asking you guys, to implore and speak to him directly about these issues.
Yeah, I think, it's a very low bar at this point for, Republicans doing the right thing, because they're so, completely indoctrined to this, like, follow Trump to the edge of the universe and beyond, right? Whatever lies he's telling, that's the gospel truth, and no one breaks from him. So, Kimberly, any thoughts on the federal impeachment before we move on to your story?
Just what everybody else is saying. I know that we don't have much time, so let's move right along.
Ooh, all right. Let's hear let's hear what's going on at the state level in impeachment, huh, Kimberly?
Yes. Quite a situation going on with our wonderful governor, Andy Beshear. Actually, it's a radical effort to impeach Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky. And a lot of people don't really know how this is going to play out, or what are the steps that they're trying to make. One of the people that Andy Beshear has called out, Tony Wheatley, which was one of the ones also involved in the effigy in front of the governor's mansion, was one of the ones that also petitioned to impeach Governor Beshear, along with a restaurant and bar owner. They're stating that Andy Beshear did not allow their legislators of Kentucky become involved in his emergency orders and the restrictions because of COVID. Also involved in that, Jason Nemeth insisted a House committee tasked with looking into calls to impeach Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear would be fair. How can we honestly know that it would be fair when we have a majority of Republicans in the House and the Senate in Capitol in Frankfurt? How can we know that this is going to be fair? These people have proven themselves time and time again that they are not fair, that they believe in some type of situation or conspiracies. So it would be very hard pressed to actually trust them on too much of anything. But Nemeth will lead the panel of 7 lawmakers as they investigate a petition filed by 4 citizens that accuses the governor of violating the Kentucky Constitution during his response to COVID-19 pandemic. Once they receive arguments from both sides, what will happen at that point is the committee can vote to end the investigation if no wrongdoing is found, or investigate further. And let's just say this, after further investigation, they will either dismiss or send a recommendation of impeachment to the Kentucky House of Representatives. Sort of like how it happens on the federal level, but just a little different. If the House dismisses the recommendation, it would not go any further, which we're praying upon that. A majority vote, though, would bring the impeachment recommendation to the Kentucky Senate. House members would then have to prosecute the impeachment trial in the Senate, and that trial could result in fines to Governor Andy Beshear, censure, or removal from office. Now, removal from office would require a 2/3 majority vote. Now, Nemeth says that he's going in open-minded, hopefully, prayerfully, promising fairness and recommending anyone watching to stay level-headed as the process plays out. Now, the committee was formed because it is legally required to have this committee. No one should get excited nor upset that the committee has been formed. It is just a legality. No decision has been made, so the evidence will lead them where it needs to go. And this is a quote from Jason Nemeth. Now, all sources at the Capitol expect that there will be no removal from office, and that the committee will make quick work to clear it up before lawmakers return in early February. Lawmakers at this particular time are basically Democrats versus Republicans on this particular issue. We need some of those Republicans to speak out louder and clearer, if anyone has spoken, that Andy Beshear does not need to be impeached, that this is taxpayers' money going down the drain. And also, I would like to also add this as well, something that I found out. On Amazon, they are now selling tank tops and t-shirts that say, "Impeach King Andy." Back to you, Karen.
That's insane. Like I can't imagine they're selling a lot of them. What, like, really? I mean, I've seen polls. He still remains quite popular in a state that, you know, went overwhelmingly for Trump, and he's still quite popular. I think people at the kind of fundamental level get he's doing the best that he can to keep us safe. You know, these kind of like very loud squeaky wheels who've, you know, launched this impeachment process. You know, I think they represent a perspective. It's not like they're just the only ones, but I think they're a small number. They're just very, very loud. The people who are anti-mask, the people who are anti, you know, CDC guidelines and anti, you know, keeping people safe are just very loud. And of course, the Republicans are just very angry because they don't really have a clear role in, you know, in the pandemic response. And despite the fact that Andy has briefed them, you know, and Andy and his staff have briefed them nearly continuously, they're still saying they've been cut out of the process, which seems outrageous to me. And Samantha Jean, any thoughts before you move into the callback?
It is completely outrageous to me. I have a lot of feelings on this issue. But I just want to take you guys back. Like, do you remember the very beginning of the pandemic? Bless Andy's heart, he inherited this this process, or just, you know, he got inaugurated in November. COVID hits us in February, March. So basically, the entire time that he has been in office, it has been nothing but COVID. And what I remember, the very beginning of COVID-19, you know, restrictions, and when we kind of went into lockdown and people were scared, or we were really unsure of what was happening. And Andy Beshear started those daily briefings. And I just remember feeling so comforted and so relieved, and just being like, oh my God, we finally have this like wonderful, level-headed leader, because we had just come off of however many years of Matt Bevin being this angry, crotchety, rude, just like yelling, ranting kind of dude. If you remember, he's the one who was talking about having, you know, chicken pox parties with his kids. And, you know, we were like, you know, if we had kept Bevin, like, would we just be having COVID parties for everybody? You know, what kind, like, and just imagining the scenario of the other side if we had still kept him in office, and just being grateful every single day that we had someone like Andy Beshear, he's just a calm, level-headed, nice guy. And I remember feeling at first in the very beginning, it was like, this is so great. Like, he is actually bringing people together, and it was so comforting. And this is one of the reasons.
Bring up also.
Oh, go for it.
That's okay. Go ahead. You know, doing this virtual thing, it's like a Geico commercial, isn't it? Go ahead.
This is part of the thing that's making me really believe in these like online platform conspiracy theories. Like, it just seems like somebody got so mad that we were actually being calm and like unified for a minute. And then they had this random stupid protest when the people were holding the signs that said, "I want a haircut." Like, give me a break. You know, we're having Black Lives Matter protests where people are literally marching for their lives and their rights. And then you have some like day drinker moms out here going, "I want a haircut. You know, my dog needs to go to the the groomers," and complaining about these sort of things that were just so trivial. And that was when the guy hung Andy Beshear in effigy because they couldn't get haircuts and, go to the movies. So they wanted to hang Andy Bashir in effigy over something just completely meaningless and unimportant. And it just the whole thing has gotten under my skin so much. It's like, they compare him to Mr. Rogers, and yet they also call him a tyrant and a king. And it's just unbelievable because he is just so calm and so kind. And I think a model leader. They have a beautiful family. He seems to be, a family man, a caring father. And it's too much. It's too much.
I just wanted to say, let us not forget in November that the Kentucky Supreme Court unanimously said that dozens and dozens of his orders were within the law. I rest my case, ladies and gentlemen, right there. Back to you, Aaron.
All right, I think we're going to do the call to action really quickly, and then we're going to be on with our guest.
Absolutely. It seems like we've already taken care of that, but I digress. So here, folks, is your call to action. If you feel like we do, and you feel like this impeachment of Andy Bashir is absolutely ridiculous, please demand that Kentucky State's legislature reject impeachment of our governor, Andy Bashir. Please call the legislative comment line, speak with the nicest people on the planet, and send a message to our House member and senator that this is futile, pointless, and time wasting. Reject calls to impeach the governor and hold the petitioners accountable for this waste of time and resources. Feel free to remind them that the law states that if the petition is denied, which it will be, then the petitioners shall be liable to witnesses and to the accused for the cost of the investigation before the committee, meaning those 4 people that are hoping to impeach our governor should be paying for all of the expenses of this waste of time, this sham here. And so I will give you that number. It is 1-800-372-7181. Save this number in your contacts. Call frequently. They really hate when you do that, when you just keep calling. Call them on issues that you care about. We'll definitely be urging action more frequently on key issues in the legislature as we transition to Progress Kentucky. So hold on to that number. And number 2, call to action, since we are dedicating this also to MLK. If there is an organization in your area that promotes equity in Black and Brown communities, please consider donating. Please frequent a Black-owned business, put your money where your mouth is, and show your support for people of color on this day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samantha Jean. And I will say, the people at the legislative comment line are the nicest humans. The operators there are just fantastic. You're gonna appreciate and enjoy the call. So the operators love to take your call and to pass on the information to your lawmakers, and they'll send it to whoever you want. Like, is it to the specific committee members? Is it just to your members? If you don't know who your member and your senator are, they'll look that up for you, very happily. Or you can, blanket the entire, every elected official in Frankfurt if you like. So really good service there. And I've lived in a number of states, and I think this is a remarkable service that we should all take advantage of. So, all right, so we are a little bit late. We're running a little bit late, so I want to apologize to our guest for keeping her around a little bit longer than maybe intended. But I'm so pleased to be joined again by Representative Attica Scott. And if you don't watch this show very often, Attica was our first guest, and she was great, but we didn't know how to deal with the audio, and there was this horrible echo. And so every time I bring her on, I just want to make sure that we have no technical glitches again. But she's been so generous with her time throughout our work. And I always, want to talk to her and hear her take on the day's news and legislative news. But of course, there's no better day to have her on than MLK Day. She has been a powerful voice for justice in the state legislature, and really welcome, Attica, Representative Scott. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you having me. It's been a full day of activities today, including being with my family at Injustice Square Park, my movement people. And so closing out the day with y'all is exactly how I feel like I should have spent the day.
Awesome. Thank you. That's so generous. And there was a really powerful clip of you speaking on the floor of the House last week, remarking upon MLK. I think you titled it The Beloved Community, talking about how we should never adjust ourselves to bigotry and to physical violence, and then turning to the kind of deadly insurrection that we just seen. What do you think that the Reverend Dr. King would think about the state of our union right now, Representative Scott?
I have no idea what he would think. But what I will say, though, is that in my conversations with people who are most often left out of politics, political decision making, the folks that I'm in community with almost every single day saw this coming, right? Like for so many years, decades even, we've yelled from the rooftops about the direction in which our country was going, but we weren't listened to. We had people say to us to give Trump a chance, and there were people like myself who were like, "Give me a break. Why would I do such a thing?" Thinking, watching how he campaigned, and time after time after time, we've seen the same Republicans who want to pontificate now as if they are the bigger people. Forgive and forget that he told Muslim women and Black women to go back to their S-hole countries, that there were thousands of children in cages who may never see their family members ever again. Those are things that I know that I and many other people I'm in movement with could never forget, and quite frankly, could never forgive. I'm a woman of faith, and I ask the Lord to touch my soul, but there's some things I just know I cannot forgive. And I can't all of a sudden act like, oh, wow, I'm going to say really great things right about now after the coup attempt in DC to make it seem like I'm the bigger person, when for 4 years I've enabled all of this mess.
Yeah, amen. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them, right? And we've seen it from day one. And I think this is the kind of least surprising, most outrageous, accumulation of a one-term, twice impeached big loser. Yeah, and the idea that they're a call for unity now is just offensive, right? Like there's no unity without accountability and without facts, like truth. We gotta come back to truth. There's like a third of the country that still is like just in la la land, believing the lies that Trump has fed them because these amazing platforms who have now shut him down, allowed him unchecked for years and years and years to spread falsehoods and to mislead and feed just garbage to his followers, who he of course called the media fake, because like that's the best way to, like, if they don't believe the media and they're only turning to you, well, perfect. You can just move them as you see fit. It's just very, very disappointing, and I concur with you that the empty calls for unity need to be addressed in a way that is real. And thank you so much for keeping it real. But I think Kimberly had a question that she wanted to ask you.
Yes, Representative Scott, so great to see you tonight. How are you doing? Just want to ask you some questions as far as at the Capitol right now. You all have been back a few times, and it's just amazing to me. My sources are telling me that the Republicans there are basically not wearing masks. You've got a lot of Trumpsters in the midst at this particular time. How is it there? What's going on out there?
We've had staff members who contracted the coronavirus, and some of them are on the floor that has majority Republican legislators. So yes, on the House floor and in committee meetings, everyone is wearing masks, but not necessarily in their offices. In fact, I've met with a couple of Republicans in their offices, and they didn't have on their masks when we met, but I kept on my mask. And I can only imagine what it's like for staff members to have those same people hovering in their faces and breathing on them, and spittle coming out of their mouths on them when they're talking to them. So, that's the reality that we face. But we also face the reality of a legislative body that has enabled all of this hatred that we've seen, not only from DC, but at the state level. We have a legislative body that was pretty quiet when a state rep stood on the House floor and said that Trump was the best president we've ever had. we've had a pretty quiet legislative body that allowed a resolution to be passed, not to have an accurate and complete census count, not to count people who are undocumented immigrants. So, you know, this body is complicit in this hatred. And quite frankly, many of us across Kentucky are as well, because far too many people were silent when those things happened and just kind of, you know, might have liked a tweet that I tweeted out about it, or Rep. Booker tweeted out about it, and then that was it. We kept going. And so we can't keep allowing ourselves to get to these points by ignoring our cries and saying, y'all, they literally have a whole house full of MAGA hats on this last day of session in 2017, and we're not, there's no uproar. We're just gonna go with it. Okay, all right. So then we find ourselves where we are today. And then, you know, there's a lot of faux outrage, as if, you know, we didn't see this coming, that we, you know, allowed someone to be seated who campaigned using images of the Obamas as apes. Like, all of this happened. And I maybe it hurts me more because for 4 years, I was the only Black woman in that legislative body. So some of it hit me a little bit harder. And I have a very close relationship with immigrant communities across the Commonwealth. But those days of acting like we don't see it are over, because I know I'm going to be one of those calling out Democrats and Republicans who all of a sudden want to act outraged as if you weren't quiet when all this mess was happening right here in your own state capitol.
Exactly. You know, I just really admire you. I always have. You're a very resilient woman because of the temperature and the climate there in Frankfurt. It cannot be very comfortable to go to work. We're going to keep you prayed up, girl. We're going to keep you prayed up.
No, I appreciate it. You're exactly right. I'm so glad that we have another Black woman, Colonel Pamela Stevenson, state rep from Kentucky House District 43. We have Representative Nima Kulkarni, who's the only Indian immigrant ever to be elected to the state legislature. So we have a lot more work to do, but we're building that base, we're building that power, and we're not being silent, even in an environment where we are the minority of the minority of the minority. We refuse to be silent amongst all of the hatred and violence, police violence, state violence that many of our communities and ourselves are experiencing.
Thank you so much, Representative Scott. Thank you so much for being here and for using your voice. We need more representation. We need Black voices. And I just want to lift you up and say thank you for all of the hard work that you are doing, because I know that it is very difficult. And I'd like to talk about at least one of your very personal experiences. So kind of the message going around, a lot of people right now on the internet, and especially Kentuckians, are kind of equating the Black Lives Matter protests with the insurrection that happened at the Capitol. So many people just want to compare them and say, you know, that they're the same, and wanting to justify the violence that happened on both sides. And so I would like to ask you to please clear the air on some of that. Could you please speak to maybe the messages or the lies that are being spread about Black Lives Matter being a militant group that is specifically about creating violence, that they've burned cities to the ground? I know I've visited Louisville several times, and it still seems to be perfectly intact, and everything is fine there. And I'd also like for you to explain, so the night that you were recently arrested at a vigil that was for Breonna Taylor, did you think that group was being violent, or that it warranted your arrest and the arrest of many other people? And could you compare that or contrast it to the situation at the Capitol, and really tell people, are these situations similar, or are they very much different?
I appreciate that question, because one of the things I've said for years about the Democratic Party is that it has to have a backbone. Right now, I'm just be real honest with y'all, the Democratic Party does not have a backbone, and I'm a Democrat. For far too long, we've allowed Republicans to shape the narrative about who we are, but we don't talk about the violent Republicans. We don't talk about the extremist Republicans. We don't talk about the radical Republicans. We just kind of let them go and call us whatever it is they choose to call us, and we don't often speak up for ourselves and fight back. In fact, our state Democratic Party was quite silent throughout the year of 2020 as it relates to the movement for Black lives, didn't say much of anything about the movement for justice for Breonna Taylor, and that was a failure on their part. So when they come back in 2022, running their candidates for office, they're going to go directly to the same Black folks who were putting their lives on the line and expect us to show up and win them some seats. So, we got folks who are not interested in that, not going to play those games. So I understand completely, and I've said myself that what we saw happen to the violent insurrectionists in DC was very different from what we saw with folks involved with the movement for Black lives. I mean, we literally had Capitol Police just nicely asking people if they would please remove themselves from the Senate chamber. Well, when you feel better, when you get, when you feel like you're up to it, please move. We had police who were involved with the violence. We had Congress people like Clyburn, who said his office is unmarked. And so for them to have found his office means that Capitol Police led them there. We had Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley talk about the fact that her panic buttons were ripped out before the insurrection. That means that Capitol Police were involved in the violence. And yet you see us, the Movement for Black Lives, marching, singing, chanting, kids leading protest marches with megaphones, holding signs, laying on the ground, hands up, and yet we're called the ones who are violent. The second night of protest in Louisville, my 19-year-old daughter and I were tear gassed by police, and we were simply standing in front of them. Yes, there were some white folks who were throwing water bottles at police. They were empty plastic water bottles, and those police officers had riot gear and shields. And your shield got hit with the empty plastic water bottle, and you decided that you were going to attack us with tear gas. My daughter, should she ever decide to have a child, her reproductive system could be harmed irreparably because of that chemical weapon of warfare. And then we were arrested and lied on by police. Said that we tried to firebomb the downtown library that's in the district that I represent, a library that I do nothing but support. And so we were lied on. I had emails afterwards from people saying we should burn your house down the way that you tried to burn down the library. So when you hear me speak with the conviction that I have, it's because I've been through what so many of my colleagues will never have to go through, because they don't live the same life that I live. And so I don't have time to hold people's hands and make them feel good about themselves, regardless of their political party, when I've been on the front lines with my community for more than 200 days, and so many of those very same people have been silent. I will say that I'm very grateful to the folks who have shown up with us, and because of them showing up, they were able to see for themselves the way that police were violent. They were able to see for themselves us being assaulted with long-range acoustic devices, to try to, blow out our eardrums. So that's what we experienced for going on 10 months now and fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor. And we had law enforcement from the alphabet soup, from federal to state to local. And so when I hear law enforcement in DC say that they were not prepared or that they were overwhelmed, I don't want to hear it. We pay you to be prepared. We pay you and train you not to be overwhelmed. But yet, when Daniel Cameron was going to come out with his announcement that there would be no justice for Breonna Taylor, 3 days before that announcement, the mayor and the governor colluded together to bring every kind of law enforcement to Louisville. For what? For what? There was no violence from the people. There was only violence from law enforcement. That is it. Over 700 people have been arrested in Louisville fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor.
It's absolutely unreal to just see the difference, in the way that Black Lives Matter protesters were treated, and then the way these violent insurrectionists who were clearly breaking the law by breaking into a government building. I mean, there was just absolutely not even any justification for that whatsoever. I support protest. I think, protest is fine, but it's just it's a completely different scenario, completely different in the number of arrests. And speaking of Daniel Cameron, I think it was something like 87 people that got arrested just for sitting on Daniel Cameron's lawn. And yet when we have, a violent break-in into the building of our Capitol, of course, we've all seen the videos of police just allowing folks to walk in. They're taking pictures with people. And so when we see, the issue of police brutality, it's not that they don't know how to stand down. It's not that they don't know how to, to not use weapons of force. It's just clearly a choice, either of political of group of people, or the skin color of the people. To say that that they just treated these groups completely differently. And it's absolutely atrocious and indefensible. So thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences. And thank you for being truly a warrior and an advocate, and for standing up for things that you believe in, and being a voice for other people. I truly appreciate you.
Certainly, it's my calling. I appreciate that.
Representative Scott, thank you again for joining us, and thank you for sharing your perspective. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Definitely. So we go back for part 2 of the legislative session on Tuesday, February 2nd. We will be advocating for Breonna's Law for Kentucky. Speaking of Breonna Taylor, there's protest, there's policy, and there's politics. They are all connected. They go together. So we're going to be pushing for the bill to be heard in committee, hopefully the Judiciary Committee. But as y'all may know, the supermajority changed the rules this year. So for the first time since I've been in session, there won't be an immediate referral to committee of a bill. So right now, Breonna's Law is just sitting there. It hasn't been referred to a committee. So that's something that's very new this legislative session, but we're hopeful that it will be assigned to the Judiciary Committee and we'll have a chance to have a hearing. Some of your viewers very well may live in districts with Democrats who haven't signed on yet as co-sponsors of Breonna's Law for Kentucky. So my call to action to you is contact your state representative to say that we must restrict the use of no-knock search warrants. And if you call yourself a Democrat and you haven't signed on to this bill, there's a problem that I know I have, and I would hope that your constituents have a problem with you as well, because you cannot ignore this movement that has been sustained for more than 200 days. And then we're about to come upon March 13th, the day that she, it'll be a year since she was murdered. And for you to be of this party that wants to position itself as the party of equity and fairness and justice, and not sign on to this important piece of legislation, to me is unbelievable. And I would hope that your constituents don't allow that to pass.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great one. The same number that you heard earlier that we implored you to write down and put in your phone, use it, call it in favor of Breonna's Law, send the message to your lawmakers, but send it to all the lawmakers. They need to make sure that bill is heard in committee and gets a fair vote. And, the numbers aren't in your favor, I know, Representative Scott, because of the super mega majority that Republicans have, and they seem to, view the world a little bit differently. But the pressure needs to be on, and I think.
But I do have to say though, on this issue of restricting no-knock warrants, actually 52% of Republicans polled across the country believe that we must restrict the use of no-knock warrants. Republicans in Frankfurt actually agree. They are just grandstanding and using this political moment for themselves to come up with their own bill. So they haven't filed any yet, but they have every intention to do so. So why not get behind the bill that already exists? Oh, I know, because it's been filed by a Black woman in the community where the murder of Breonna Taylor happened.
Let's tell the truth about it.
Right.
Yeah, that would be shameful, but that would be completely, I would not be surprised, certainly. All right, let's keep the pressure on. And again, thank you so much, Representative Scott. Anytime you have anything you want to share with us, feel free to hit us up. We'll share it out to our group, to our Facebook page, to our Twitter, whatever we need to do to amplify your calls for justice. And of course, you are always welcome on if you just want to, I'll keep harassing you to bring you back. That is for sure going to happen. But if there's any point you're like, oh, you know what, I should tell those folks, tell us.
All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a great night.
You too.
All right, what a show. Oh my gosh, so glad to have her join us. And very excited to have Kimberly close us out. I'm sorry, it's a little bit after 8. We did run over an hour, and I apologize. But again, thank you so much for giving us time, viewers. And Kimberly, thank you so much for wrapping us up.
Sure. Are you getting our newsletter? I know I say this every week, but I don't think you're getting it. So please DM us on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll add you to the email list. You need to be getting this newsletter. I get it. We all get it. We stay in the know. We want you to be in the know as well. And once again, every week, we just want to say thanks to Ken at Couchfire Media. Couchfire Media ignites multi-camera, live stream, fiction narrative, nonfiction, educational, informative, animation, and commercial video production content. Set your content on fire with Couchfire Media. You can reach them at couchfiremedia.com. Now, also the song that you hear every week, I say it every week, but I'm just so appreciative to Nate. And you can find more of his music at natosongs.com. That's natosongs.com. Make sure you follow and watch our co-host and the other wonderful work that they're doing. Denise Gray's Kentucky Conversations. The show gives us updates on what's going on in the Kentucky General Assembly. Next month will inform us of all the ins and outs of the Kentucky Democratic Party's reorganization plan. Please tune in and get involved there. You can watch the replay of all of the episodes of Denise Gray's Kentucky Conversations on the Bluegrass Activist Alliance Facebook page or at Denise Gray's public figure page, okay? And, of course, you should always be watching the Jones Report every Sunday with Mike Breuer, Betsy Foster, and also our producer, Ken Howe, and of course, yours truly, your host of the Jones Report. We will be live this week on Wednesday at 11 a.m. on the Jones Report radio program page on Facebook. Make sure you get in, look at it. We're going to be having so much fun. We're going to be drinking. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff on there for the inauguration. And of course, I'm going to wear my beautiful ring my son got me for my Founders Day anniversary, for the AKAs. I just had to, Aaron expects me to bring that up. I know you guys do, and I'm so happy to be at AKA, along with our new soon-to-be Vice President, Kamala Harris. Always, the big news now is that Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee will be changing our name and broadening our focus to address the critical issues and political accountability that our Commonwealth needs to address and to get ahead at the state and national level. So are you ready for us? I know we've talked about it previously, Aaron did, but we will soon be Progress Kentucky because we're going to be progressing in Kentucky, okay? We're not going to stay stagnant any longer. We're going to be Progress Kentucky. So we'll still be producing our weekly show on Mondays. You can see us right here at 7 p.m. every Monday. And also we'll be keeping active on social media and supporting ground organizing. So we're going to always work to elevate voices and issues from across the Bluegrass. Also, one additional change for us is that we've got to change the name of our Monday night live stream. So the time has come for Moscow Mitch Monday. It's come and gone. Demote Mitch. We've done that, right? We've done that. We're so proud of ourselves for doing that. Atlanta, thank you so much. So we're going to have a new name, and it has been selected. But we will be coming out with that very, very soon. And I think you'll be quite amazed at the new name. So until then, continue to tune in, watch, share this video, please. Share this video everywhere that you can, because this is information that you can honestly use. And until next week, wait a minute. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you to Samantha Jean. Thank you to Representative Attica Scott coming on tonight. But until next week, visit the page, okay? And I'll see you on Wednesday with the Jones Report Facebook radio program, okay? See you next week.